They laughed the moment I said I was starting my own thing. Not a polite smile, not quiet doubt, but real laughter that echoed across the break room like a verdict had already been passed on my life. That sound stayed with me longer than the cardboard box I carried out of the building an hour later. The company I gave 5 years to fired me on a Friday afternoon. No warning. No real explanation. Just a rushed meeting, a fake apology, and security watching me pack my desk like I might steal a stapler to survive. The same managers who once praised my ideas now avoided eye contact. The same coworkers who borrowed my notes pretended not to see me. What hurt most was not the job loss. It was the way they reduced me to nothing the moment I became inconvenient. On my way out, I overheard them joking. Someone said I would be back begging within a month. Someone else said people like me always dream too big and fail fast. That was the moment something hardened inside me. I did not argue. I did not defend myself. I smiled, nodded, and walked away with my head down. That silence became my shield. I started small, painfully small. A borrowed laptop, a folding table in my apartment, and a bank account that looked more like a countdown clock than a safety net. Every morning I woke up scared, but I worked anyway. Every night I questioned myself, then kept going. I built systems while they built excuses. I learned what they never bothered to understand. I listened where they dismissed. I improved what they ignored. Months passed. Then a year. They never noticed me again, and that was the biggest mistake they made, because while they were laughing at someone else, while they were busy congratulating themselves for getting rid of me, I was quietly positioning myself where no one thought to look. Contracts were signed without my face attached. Partnerships formed under a name they had never heard. Numbers started moving in my favor, slowly at first, then faster. The company that fired me was struggling. Layoffs. Bad decisions. Leadership panic hidden behind confident emails. I watched it all from a distance, calm and patient. They thought the story ended the day I walked out with that box. They had no idea it was just beginning. No one from that company ever reached out. No check-in. No message. No fake concern. I became invisible to them, and honestly, that worked in my favor. When people stop watching you, you can move however you want. I stopped trying to prove anything to anyone. I focused on building something that could survive without applause. My days turned into long work sessions, strategy calls, and learning curves that felt like walls. Some weeks I barely slept. Some months I barely breathed. But I kept moving forward because failure was no longer an option, it was a threat. Money started coming in, not fast, but steady. Then the steady turned into consistent. Then consistent turned into scalable. I reinvested everything. No luxury. No flexing. No social media noise. Just growth. Here's the part they never saw. I didn't build a business. I built leverage. While they were chasing surface-level success, I was studying ownership. While they were posting wins, I was structuring control. While they were celebrating short-term profit, I was planning long-term positioning, and then I started hearing things. A former coworker reached out casually one day. Said the company was struggling. Clients were leaving. Investors were nervous. Management was making desperate moves. Departments were being cut quietly. People were scared, but pretending everything was fine. That's when the pieces clicked. I didn't rush. I didn't react emotionally. I watched. I waited. I gathered information. I followed the financial patterns. I learned who had influence and who was just noise. I mapped the weaknesses they didn't know they were showing. They still thought I was irrelevant. Meanwhile, I was building relationships they didn't know existed. Quiet meetings. Silent negotiations. Strategic partnerships. My name stayed off the surface, but my fingerprints started showing up everywhere behind the scenes. Here's the truth no one talks about. Power doesn't announce itself. It moves quietly. It waits patiently. It strikes precisely. One night, I pulled up their company profile and saw something that changed everything. Their valuation had dropped. Their stock had dipped. Their structure had cracks. Big ones. That was my opening, not for revenge, for control, because the people who laughed at me never imagined the person they fired would one day be in a position to make decisions about their future, and the most dangerous part, They still had no idea I existed in their world anymore, but that world was about to change. I remember the exact moment I realized this was no longer about survival. It was about timing. Every move I made after that point was calculated, not emotional. I had already learned what desperation looked like. I refused to wear it again. I hired people quietly. Not flashy names, not loud personalities. I brought in minds that understood growth, risk, and pressure. People who had seen companies rise and collapse and knew where the cracks usually formed. Together, we studied the industry from the outside like chess players watching a board before making the first move. The company that fired me kept making the same mistake. They believed their brand was stronger than reality. They ignored customer feedback. They cut corners. They lost talent and pretended it was efficiency. Each decision weakened them just a little more. I stayed invisible. We acquired small competitors first. Ones they didn't consider threats. Ones they overlooked completely. Each acquisition expanded our reach, our data, our leverage. Slowly, quietly, we became a presence in spaces they once dominated. I knew their playbook because I helped write it years ago. Former suppliers started calling us instead of them. Vendors followed the money. Clients followed stability. Every shift felt small on the surface, but underneath, the foundation was moving. Then came the call that confirmed everything. An industry contact told me investors were nervous. The board was divided. Leadership was scrambling to keep control. That's when I understood how close they were to the edge. I still did nothing publicly. Instead, I prepared the final structure. Legal teams. Financial pathways. Clean documentation. Everything built to move fast when the moment arrived. No chaos. No noise. Just precision. At night, I sometimes thought about that day in the break room. The laughter. The looks. The way they dismissed me like I was already written off. That memory didn't fuel anger anymore. It fueled clarity. They underestimated patience. They underestimated silence. They underestimated what happens when someone stops seeking approval and starts seeking ownership. Then the opportunity appeared. A major stakeholder wanted out. Quietly. Quickly. No headlines. No drama. Just an exit before things got worse. I was ready. We moved faster than anyone expected. Paperwork moved. Numbers aligned. Agreements finalized. All without my face attached to any of it. By the time the news reached the company, it was already done. Control had shifted. They just didn't know to whom, and soon, they would find out. The morning everything changed. They walked into work like it was just another day. Emails were sent. Meetings were scheduled. Coffee was poured. No alarms. No warnings. That was the beauty of it. When control shifts quietly, people never feel the ground move until it is already gone. Behind the scenes, the board was in chaos. Confusion spread fast when ownership papers landed on the table. Questions followed. Who approved this? How did this happen? Why were the numbers already finalized? No one had answers yet. I stayed out of sight. My legal team handled communication. My financial advisors stayed silent. My name remained buried under layers of corporate structure. I wanted them unsettled before I wanted them informed. Suspense works better when people sense danger but cannot locate it. Employees started whispering. Layoff rumors returned. Managers tightened their grip. Leadership called emergency meetings with forced confidence. The same confidence they once used to fire me without blinking. Then came the email. An announcement of a change in controlling interest. No names. No faces. Just a statement that new ownership had acquired a majority stake and would be reviewing operations immediately. That single sentence sent shockwaves through every department. I watched reactions from a distance. Former coworkers posted vague messages online about uncertainty. Some pretended it was no big deal. Others quietly reached out to recruiters. Fear always leaks through confidence. What they did not know was how closely I was watching them. I reviewed performance reports. Read internal complaints. Studied leadership failures. I remembered who laughed. Who stayed silent. Who benefited from my dismissal. Every name meant something now. One executive tried to reassure the team by saying the new owners would never interfere with leadership. That lie barely lasted an hour, because the next step was already moving. Audits began. Budget freezes followed. Contract reviews exposed careless decisions. Expenses that once went unnoticed were suddenly highlighted. Profits that looked healthy were revealed to be inflated by shortcuts. Pressure tightened. That was when I made my first visible move. A request went out for a private leadership briefing with the new ownership representative. Panic spread fast. Executives argued over who would attend. Everyone wanted to protect their position. No one wanted to be blamed. They still assumed the owner was some distant investment group. They never imagined the person who once carried a cardboard box out of that building was now deciding who stayed and who fell. And soon, the silence I had mastered was about to speak for me. The leadership briefing did not happen right away. It was delayed twice, each time increasing the tension inside the building. When people do not know who holds power, they start exposing their worst instincts. Blame shifted. Alliances broke. Executives protected themselves instead of the company. I watched it all unfold with a calm I never thought I would have. While they argued internally, I reviewed everything they never thought anyone would question. Inflated projections. Questionable hiring decisions. Bonuses paid during losses. The deeper I looked, the clearer the picture became. This company had not failed because of the market. It failed because of arrogance. I approved deeper audits. Nothing dramatic. Nothing obvious. Just enough pressure to make mistakes surface. And they did. One by one. A senior manager resigned suddenly. Another was placed on leave. Departments were forced to justify budgets they had been abusing for years. Panic spread quietly, the kind that does not scream but seeps into every conversation. That was when the calls started. Old coworkers who once ignored me suddenly remembered my number. They framed it as concern, curiosity, casual check-ins. I did not respond. Silence had become my strongest position. When people talk to fill the void, they reveal everything. Then came the final preparation. I scheduled a mandatory all-hands meeting. No agenda shared. No details released. Just a date and time. Attendance required. The building buzzed with speculation. Some thought layoffs were coming. Others expected a merger announcement. No one guessed the truth. I arrived early that day, not through the front entrance, but through a private access point reserved for ownership. Walking those halls again felt surreal. The same floors. The same lighting. The same space where they once laughed at my ambition. Only this time, everything belonged to me. I stood behind the glass wall of the boardroom and watched them file in. Faces tense. Voices low. Confidence gone. The people who once decided my future were now waiting for someone else to decide theirs. I did not enter immediately. I let the silence stretch. I wanted them uncomfortable. I wanted them unsure. I wanted them remembering every decision that brought them here. When I finally stepped forward, the room went still. Some recognized me instantly. Others needed a second. Shock spread across their faces like a slow wave. Mouths opened. Eyes widened. Breaths caught. In that moment, every laugh from the past finally found its answer, and I had not even spoken yet. I stood there without rushing a single word. Silence does something powerful when people expect authority to speak. It forces memory to surface. I watched it happen in real time. The manager who smirked when I was fired stared at the table. The executive who approved my termination swallowed hard. A few faces showed disbelief, others fear, and some tried to calculate whether pretending not to recognize me would help. I did not. I introduced myself simply, not with titles or explanations. I did not need to explain my journey. They were living the result of it. I reminded them that ownership had changed and that accountability was no longer optional. My voice stayed calm, almost gentle, which made every word land heavier. I laid out the facts. The financial decline. The ignored warnings. The reckless decisions. I did not accuse. I presented evidence. Reports. Numbers. Timelines. The truth does not need volume to dominate a room. One by one, their confidence collapsed. I addressed the culture next. The way talent was dismissed. The way loyalty was mocked. The way arrogance replaced leadership. I paused just long enough for them to realize I was describing my own past without naming it. That was intentional. I announced immediate changes. Restructuring. Performance reviews. Leadership evaluations. No promises of safety. No threats either. Just clarity. The same clarity I was denied when they decided I was expendable. Some tried to speak. I let them. Excuses poured out. Market conditions. External pressure. Bad timing. I listened politely, then reminded them that accountability does not negotiate with excuses. Then came the part they feared most. I announced that roles would be reassessed based on impact, not position. Influence would no longer protect incompetence. History would no longer justify entitlement. The room shifted when they understood what that meant. The power dynamic had fully reversed. As the meeting ended, I caught a few of them watching me like I was something unreal. The person they once dismissed had become unavoidable. Their past decision now sat across from them, fully in control. I walked out without celebrating. Revenge did not feel loud. It felt complete, but this was not the end. Because true revenge is not taking something away, and anger it is letting people stay long enough to understand exactly why they are losing everything they once took for granted. The days after the meeting felt heavier than anything I had experienced before. The building still looked the same, but the energy had shifted. People walked slower. Conversations stopped when I passed. Every smile felt forced. Every greeting carried fear underneath it. That was exactly what I wanted. I did not rush the changes. I let anticipation do the work. When people do not know when the floor will drop, they expose themselves. Emails grew defensive. Reports became rushed. Mistakes increased. Pressure has a way of revealing who deserves power and who only borrowed it. I reviewed everything personally, performance records from years ago, internal complaints that were ignored, talented employees who were pushed out while favorites were promoted. Patterns emerged, and they all pointed to the same names. The same leaders who laughed when I was fired had built their authority on fear and shortcuts. One by one, I called private meetings, not to fire them. Not yet. I asked questions instead. Calm ones. Direct ones. Questions that required honesty. Some lied. Some avoided. Some cracked completely. Watching them struggle to justify decisions they once made so casually was almost surreal. Rumors spread fast. Employees whispered that leadership was being replaced. That departments would be dissolved. That ownership had a personal vendetta. None of it was fully wrong, and none of it was fully right. The uncertainty was the punishment. Then I made the move that shook everyone. I announced a full leadership review, effective immediately. External evaluators. Zero internal influence. No protection from seniority. No immunity from history. The announcement alone drained color from several faces. One executive tried to resign quietly. I declined the request. Accountability does not end with an exit. Another attempted to shift blame downward. That tactic failed instantly. They were running out of moves. I watched them realize it in stages. First denial. Then bargaining. Then fear. The same stages I went through alone after being fired. The difference was they had each other, and I had already survived it once. Late one evening, I stood by the window overlooking the city and thought about how close I was to walking away years ago. How easily this story could have ended differently. That reflection grounded me. This was not cruelty. This was consequence. Tomorrow, the final decisions would be delivered. Tomorrow, titles would fall. Tomorrow, the laughter would be gone for good, and they knew it. The final day arrived without drama. No alarms. No raised voices. Just calm schedules and sealed envelopes waiting on desks. That was intentional. Endings do not need noise when the message is already clear. I delivered the decisions personally. Executives who built their power on fear were removed. Managers who protected incompetence were demoted. Leaders who ignored talent were replaced by people who earned trust, not demanded it. Every decision was documented. Every outcome was justified. No room for debate. No space for excuses. Some accepted it quietly. Others broke down. A few tried to remind me of old conversations, old favors, old authority. None of that mattered anymore. Titles lose meaning the moment ownership changes hands. I did not enjoy their discomfort. I acknowledged it. There is a difference. Revenge driven by rage burns fast. Revenge built on growth lasts longer. Then I did something they never expected. I addressed the entire company. I spoke about accountability, not humiliation. I spoke about rebuilding culture, not punishing people. I made it clear that this was not about erasing the past, but learning from it. The employees listened differently now. They were not afraid. They were hopeful. As the meeting ended, I caught my reflection in the glass wall of the boardroom. I barely recognized the person staring back. Not because I had changed who I was, but because I finally owned it. I walked past the break room where the laughter once followed me. It was quiet now. Not tense. Just respectful. The power had shifted completely. Later that evening, I packed my things not into a box, but into a briefcase. I exited through the front door this time. No security watching. No lowered eyes. Just a building that finally reflected the values it claimed to stand for. They laughed when I started small. They stopped laughing when they realized I never stopped building, and the company that once fired me learned a lesson they would never forget. You never know who you are underestimating.